Let's take an example to understand why using expensive processes could be cumbersome in certain situations. Sometimes a single application may be required to perform several similar tasks. For example, let's say we have a web server that accepts client requests for web pages, images, sound, and so many different types of web content. Now, a busy web server may have thousands of clients concurrently sending requests to it. So let's assume we have this web server over here, and there are these thousands of clients or n number of clients that are simultaneously sending requests to this web server. Now, if this web server over here is a traditional single threaded process, the kind of processes that we have talked about so far, then it would only be able to service one client at a time. So what that means is this web server will be servicing, let's say, client 1 first, followed by client 2, and so on up to this nth client. So many of these clients will have to wait a long time until the web server gets to service them. Now this is a problem. It will spoil the user or client experience. One way of solving this problem is to have the server run as a single process, and the server will only accept the requests. Whenever the server receives a request, it creates a separate child process to service this request. The child process that is created would be a clone of the original web server process. So for instance, when the web server receives this request from client 1, it will create a new clone process. Let's say WSC1. This is web server clone 1. So this is the child process of the original web server, which has the same capabilities. And now the web server will redirect this client 1 request to this clone 1 for service. Similarly, when the web server receives this second request, it will again create another clone, web server clone 2, and redirect this client 2 request to this clone 2 for service. So the original web server will keep running and accepting requests. For every request it receives, it will create a new clone process or a child process and redirect the request to this child process for service. So essentially, many requests can now be serviced in parallel by these clone processes or child processes. In fact, just so you know, this kind of process creation method was in common use before threads became popular. However, as we have seen, process creation is a time consuming and resource intensive affair, as we have already seen. So mainly because of all the space and the overhead that is associated with creating new processes. Furthermore, note that all of these child processes that are created by the original process, they are performing the same tasks as the existing process. So why incur all of this overhead?